6 months later, while my son and daughter-in-law were drowning in $127,000 worth of bills for my 5-continent luxury world tour, I was sipping champagne on a private yacht in the Mediterranean, having the time of my life with people who actually understood that age is just a number. Before we begin, make sure to like and subscribe, and tell me in the comments, have you ever been told you're too old to pursue your dreams by people who were supposed to support you, only to discover they had their own selfish reasons for keeping you small? Share your story below, because today you're going to learn that sometimes the family members who think they can control your golden years are about to discover they just underestimated the wrong 70-year-old. This story is about the morning when I realized that my own son, the child I'd raised, put through medical school, supported through his residency, and helped establish his successful cardiology practice, had been systematically sabotaging my retirement dreams while convincing me it was all for my own safety and well-being. When I discovered that the son I'd sacrificed for, invested in, and trusted with my most vulnerable moments had been quietly positioning himself to control my travel budget while I was still very much alive and capable of making my own decisions about how to spend my golden years. My name is Eleanor Victoria Hartwell, and at 70 years old, I thought I'd found the perfect balance between family connection and personal independence in my beautifully appointed guest suite in my son Michael's sprawling estate in Greenwich, Connecticut. For 2 years, this arrangement had seemed like an ideal solution for a widow who wanted to remain close to family while maintaining her autonomy and pursuing the travel dreams she'd deferred for decades. The estate itself was magnificent. A colonial-style mansion built in 1987 on 4 acres of meticulously landscaped grounds, with views of Long Island Sound and the kind of understated elegance that spoke to serious money rather than flashy displays of wealth. Michael and Amanda had purchased the property 3 years earlier for $3.2 million, a significant investment that had stretched their budget even with Michael's substantial income as one of Greenwich Hospital's most successful cardiologists. Had my own space, a luxurious 200-square-foot suite with a private entrance, marble bathroom with heated floors, gourmet kitchenette equipped with European appliances, and French doors opening onto a terrace overlooking Long Island Sound. The suite had been professionally decorated by Amanda's interior designer friend, featuring custom furniture, silk wallpaper, and the kind of sophisticated touches that made it feel like a high-end hotel rather than a family living arrangement. More importantly, I was close enough to my family to be helpful when needed, available to spend time with my granddaughter Sophia whenever Michael and his wife Amanda required support, yet independent enough to maintain my own routines, friendships, and most importantly, my lifelong passion for travel and cultural exploration. What I didn't know was that the son I'd been financially supporting for over 30 years had been quietly working to ensure that my independence would be limited to whatever activities he deemed appropriate for a woman of my age, and that my substantial travel budget would remain, safely in accounts where he could eventually inherit it rather than watching me waste it on what he called unnecessary adventures. The guest suite had become my sanctuary after my husband, Charles Montgomery Hartwell, died 3 years ago, from a sudden heart attack that had taken him at 72, just 6 months after we'd finally sold our successful import business and were planning to spend our golden years visiting all the places we'd dreamed of exploring throughout our 46 years of marriage. Charles and I had built our life together through entrepreneurial vision, international business connections, and the kind of shared wanderlust that had sustained us through every challenge we'd faced while building Hartwell International Imports from a small antique importing operation into a multi-million-dollar international trade business. Our story had begun in 1975, when I'd graduated from Wellesley College with a degree in international business, and Charles had completed his MBA at Wharton. We'd met at a business networking event in New York City, where we'd discovered our shared fascination with global cultures, international trade, and the untapped potential of bringing authentic artisan products from developing countries to American consumers who were hungry for something beyond mass-produced merchandise. Eleanor, "You have such an sophisticated understanding of international markets," Charles had said during our first dinner together. "Most people think importing is just about finding cheap products overseas, but you clearly understand that it's about building relationships, understanding cultures, and creating value through authentic connections." That first conversation had lasted until 3 in the morning, as we'd discussed everything from Chinese porcelain manufacturing techniques to the economic impact of fair trade policies on South American artisan communities. Charles had grown up in a family that had operated a small importing business specializing in European antiques, while I'd spent my college summers working with international development organizations that had exposed me to the challenges and opportunities of global commerce. Our first business venture had been remarkably modest, $25,000 of combined savings that we'd used to purchase a small warehouse in Stamford and establish relationships with textile manufacturers in India and Thailand who could produce high-quality fabrics and home furnishings for the American market. We'd spent our honeymoon in 1976 traveling through Asia, not just as tourists, but as serious business partners learning about production techniques, quality standards, and the cultural contexts that influence design and manufacturing. Charles had spent 38 years building Hartwell International Imports from that single warehouse into a company with suppliers across Asia, Europe, and South America, developing relationships with artisans and manufacturers that had required extensive travel and cultural immersion. He'd been the kind of businessman who understood that successful international trade required not just financial acumen, but genuine appreciation for different cultures, languages, and ways of life. I had been his equal partner in every aspect of the business, handling logistics, quality control, and customer relations while developing my own expertise in international shipping, customs regulations, and cross-cultural communication. Our work had taken us to over 40 countries throughout our careers, and every business trip had also been an opportunity for cultural exploration that had fed our shared passion for history, art, and authentic travel experiences. By the time we'd sold Hartwell International Imports in 2021, the company had grown to employ 63 people, maintained offices in Los Angeles, Atlanta, and New York, and generated annual revenues of $18 million. Our client base had included major department stores, boutique retailers, and interior design firms throughout North America, all of whom had relied on our expertise in sourcing unique, high-quality products that couldn't be found through traditional wholesale channels. Together, Charles and I had earned substantial wealth through our import business, but more importantly, we'd developed a deep appreciation for travel as education, adventure, and spiritual enrichment. We'd always planned that our retirement would be dedicated to the kind of leisurely, immersive travel that our business obligations had never quite allowed, months-long stays in places we'd only briefly visited for work, cultural tours led by local experts, and the luxury travel experiences we'd deferred while building our company. Michael David Hartwell had been our only child, born in 1978 after 5 years of trying to conceive and several miscarriages that had made us cherish him as the miracle that completed our family. From the moment he'd taken his first breath, Michael had been the beneficiary of every advantage Charles and I could provide: the finest private schools, extensive travel opportunities, cultural enrichment, and most importantly, the kind of educational investment that had allowed him to pursue his dream of becoming a physician. Even as a young child, Michael had displayed the intelligence and determination that would characterize his entire approach to life. He'd been reading by age 4, had mastered complex mathematical concepts years ahead of his peers, and had shown an early aptitude for science that had made him a natural choice for advanced academic programs throughout his educational career. Teachers had consistently praised his analytical thinking, his work ethic, and his ability to absorb and apply complex information. Michael's childhood had been enriched by the international travel that had been an integral part of our business operations. By age 16, he'd visited 23 countries, spoke conversational Spanish and French, and had developed the kind of cultural sophistication that came from genuine exposure to different ways of life rather than superficial tourist experiences. Mom and Dad, traveling with you has taught me that education isn't just about what you learn in classrooms, Michael had said during his high school valedictorian speech. You've shown me that real learning comes from understanding how people live, think, and solve problems in different parts of the world. Michael's path to becoming a successful cardiologist had been expensive but rewarding for our entire family. His undergraduate education at Harvard had cost $240,000 over 4 years, even with partial merit scholarships that had recognized his academic excellence. Medical school at Johns Hopkins had cost an additional $280,000 over 4 years, representing one of the most expensive medical programs in the country, but also one that had provided unparalleled training and networking opportunities. Residency support had required another $150,000 in living assistance, as medical residents earned minimal salaries while working 80-hour weeks and accumulating the clinical experience necessary to become practicing physicians. Charles and I had provided this support gladly, understanding that Michael's medical training represented not just his individual achievement, but an investment in his ability to contribute meaningfully to society while building financial security for his own family. We believe in investing in our son's education, Charles had explained to friends who'd questioned our substantial financial commitment to Michael's medical training. Eleanor and I built our success through taking calculated risks and making long-term investments. Supporting Michael's medical career is the most meaningful way we can use our resources to ensure his future success and happiness. Establishing Michael's cardiology practice had involved another $200,000 investment in equipment, office leasing, and initial operating costs. Cardiology required specialized diagnostic equipment, surgical instruments, and office facilities that met strict medical standards while also providing the kind of professional environment that would attract patients seeking premium medical care. By 2019, Michael's practice had become one of the most successful cardiology offices in Fairfield County, serving wealthy clients who demanded the highest level of medical expertise and personalized attention. His annual income had grown to over $450,000, and he'd developed a reputation for innovative treatment approaches and exceptional patient outcomes that had made him a sought-after specialist. When Michael had married Amanda Richardson in 2015, a pharmaceutical sales representative with her own successful career and impressive educational background, we'd been pleased with his choice and had contributed $75,000 toward their wedding and honeymoon. The wedding had been held at the Greenwich Country Club, a lavish celebration for 220 guests that had reflected both families' social status and professional achievements. Amanda had seemed intelligent, ambitious, and genuinely caring during their courtship period. She'd graduated from Northwestern University with a degree in biology, had built a successful career in pharmaceutical sales, and had demonstrated the kind of social sophistication and professional competence that had made her an excellent match for Michael's personality and career aspirations. Mrs. Hartwell, I want you to know how much I appreciate the example you and Mr. Hartwell have set for Michael, Amanda had said during one of our early family dinners. He talks constantly about the values you've instilled in him and the opportunities you've provided. I hope I can contribute to continuing those family traditions. Amanda's background had been remarkably similar to our own family's emphasis on education and professional achievement. Her parents were both college professors who had instilled in her the importance of intellectual curiosity, hard work, and social responsibility. She'd earned a master's degree in business administration while working full-time, demonstrating the kind of determination and time management skills that had impressed both Charles and me. The birth of Sophia Marie Hartwell in 2018 had brought us tremendous joy and had seemed to complete the picture of family success that Charles and I had been building for decades. Sophia had been a beautiful, healthy baby who'd brought new energy and purpose to our lives, and Charles and I had eagerly embraced our roles as devoted grandparents. We'd established a $50,000 education fund for Sophia within weeks of her birth, contributing $500 per month to ensure our granddaughter would have the same educational opportunities that had been so crucial to Michael's success. We'd also purchased savings bonds, opened investment accounts, and begun planning for the kind of educational experiences that would give Sophia every possible advantage. The early years of Sophia's life had been filled with regular visits, family, celebrations, and the kind of multi-generational bonding that had enriched all our lives. Charles and I had enjoyed being able to share our travel experiences with Sophia through photo albums, cultural artifacts we'd collected over the years, and stories about the fascinating people and places we'd encountered during our business travels. "Grandma Eleanor, will you take me to see the temples in Thailand when I'm older?" 4-year-old Sophia had asked during one of our storytelling sessions. "I want to see the golden statues you showed me in your pictures." "Of course, darling," I'd replied, already imagining the day when Sophia would be old enough to appreciate the cultural wonders that had shaped my own understanding of the world. "Traveling is one of the best educations you can have, and Grandma will make sure you get to see amazing places." When Charles had died suddenly in March 2021, our entire family's foundation had been shaken in ways that had tested everyone's strength and resilience. Charles had suffered a massive heart attack while working in our home office, reviewing final details for a luxury travel package we'd been planning for our upcoming 47th wedding anniversary. He'd been healthy, active, and completely engaged with life until the moment his heart simply stopped beating. The funeral had been a celebration of Charles's life and achievements, attended by over 300 people, including business associates from around the world, family, friends, and community members whose lives had been touched by Charles's generosity and integrity. Michael had delivered a beautiful eulogy that had captured his father's entrepreneurial spirit, his dedication to family, and his belief that success was measured not just by financial achievement, but by the positive impact you had on other people's lives. "Dad taught me that real wealth comes from building meaningful relationships, pursuing your passions, and never being afraid to explore new possibilities," Michael had said during the service. "He showed me that success isn't just about what you accomplish in business. It's about how you use your resources to enrich your family's life and contribute to your community." In the months following Charles's death, Michael and Amanda had been incredibly supportive during my adjustment period, visiting regularly to check on my well-being and helping me navigate the practical challenges of widowhood. Everything about my daily routine had required adjustment, from cooking meals for one person to making financial decisions without Charles's input and perspective. The decision to sell our family estate and move into Michael and Amanda's guest suite had emerged gradually, as I'd struggled with the isolation and maintenance challenges of living alone in a large house filled with 46 years of memories. Michael and Amanda had presented the arrangement as a caring solution that would provide me with family connection while respecting my need for independence. "Mom, you shouldn't be rattling around in that big house all by yourself," Michael had said during one of our family dinners, his voice filled with apparent concern. "The maintenance alone is overwhelming, and we worry about you being isolated when you're dealing with grief. Why don't you sell the house and move into our guest suite? You'd have complete privacy and independence, but we'd be right there if you needed anything. Plus, Sophia would love having Grandma so close by." Amanda had been equally enthusiastic about the arrangement, emphasizing how much she valued intergenerational family relationships and how beneficial my presence would be for Sophia's development. "Eleanor, having you living here would be such a gift for our entire family," Amanda had said. "Sophia would benefit enormously from having such an accomplished grandmother nearby, and Michael and I would love knowing that you're secure and connected to family during this difficult transition." The financial arrangement had seemed generous and practical for everyone involved. I'd sold our Greenwich estate for $2.8 million, a price that had reflected both the property's prime location and the extensive renovations Charles and I had completed over the years. The house had been our sanctuary for 32 years, featuring 6 bedrooms, 4 bathrooms, a chef's kitchen, library, and the kind of mature landscaping that had taken decades to establish. I'd invested the proceeds from the house sale in Sao, a diversified portfolio managed by Steinberg Wealth Management, the same firm that had handled our business finances for over 15 years. The portfolio had been designed to generate approximately $125,000 annually in dividends and interest while preserving the principal for long-term growth, providing me with more than enough income to maintain my comfortable lifestyle while pursuing the travel dreams that had become my primary passion. The guest suite rental had been set at $2,000 per month, well below market rate for comparable luxury accommodations in Greenwich, and had included all utilities, grounds maintenance, household services, and access to Michael and Amanda's pool, tennis court, and entertainment spaces. The arrangement had also provided me with family meal options, childcare assistance when needed, and the kind of social connection that had helped ease my transition from married life to widowhood. For 2 years, this financial arrangement had provided me with security, comfort, and what I'd believed was the perfect foundation for pursuing the extensive travel that had become my primary source of joy and purpose in retirement. My investment income had been more than sufficient to cover my modest living expenses, while leaving approximately $80,000 annually available for the luxury travel experiences that Charles and I had always planned to enjoy together. But what I hadn't understood was that Michael and Amanda had viewed my substantial travel budget not as evidence of healthy independence and financial security, but as a threat to their own long-term financial planning and an unnecessary drain on what they'd already begun to consider their eventual inheritance. The passion for travel that had sustained Charles and me throughout our business careers had intensified after his death, becoming both a way to honor his memory and a source of personal healing that had helped me navigate the challenges of rebuilding my life as a single woman. Every trip I'd planned had included places Charles and I had discussed visiting together, cultural experiences we'd dreamed of sharing, and the kind of immersive travel that our business obligations had never quite allowed. My first major trip, after Charles's death, had been a 3-week cultural tour of Morocco, a country we'd visited briefly for business, but had never had time to truly explore and appreciate. The tour had been organized by Exclusive Cultural Expeditions, a luxury travel company that specialized in small group experiences led by local experts and historians. Mrs. Hartwell, this Morocco tour represents exactly the kind of authentic, cultural immersion that discerning travelers seek, the travel consultant had explained during our planning session. You'll stay in restored riads, dine with local families, visit artisan workshops, and explore historical sites with guides who can provide insights that go far beyond typical tourist experiences. The Morocco trip had been transformative, providing me with the kind of profound cultural engagement that had reminded me why travel had always been such an important part of my identity. I'd learned traditional cooking techniques from Berber women in the Atlas Mountains, had studied Islamic architecture with university professors in Fez, and had developed friendships with fellow travelers who shared my appreciation for authentic cultural experiences. Upon returning from Morocco, I'd immediately begun planning my next adventure, a month-long exploration of Japan that would combine historical study, culinary experiences, and artistic appreciation in ways that would honor both my own interests and Charles's lifelong fascination with Japanese business culture. "Eleanor, you seem so energized by your travel planning," my friend Margaret Patterson had observed during one of our regular lunch meetings. "It's wonderful to see you pursuing your passions with such enthusiasm. Charles would be so proud of how you're honoring your shared dreams." The Japan trip had been scheduled for October 2023, with an itinerary that included 2 weeks in Kyoto studying traditional arts and architecture, 1 week in Tokyo exploring contemporary culture and cuisine, and 1 week in rural areas experiencing traditional Japanese hospitality in family-run ryokans. But when I'd shared my detailed Japan plans with Michael and Amanda during a family dinner, their response had been surprisingly negative and had marked the beginning of what I'd later understand was their systematic campaign to limit my travel independence. "Mom, Don't you think 3 weeks in Japan is a bit ambitious for someone your age? Michael had said, his tone suggesting medical concern rather than family support. The time zone changes alone could be challenging for your system, and navigating a foreign country where you don't speak the language could be stressful and potentially dangerous. Amanda had been equally discouraging, focusing on practical concerns that had seemed reasonable at the time, but had actually been designed to undermine my confidence in my own travel capabilities. Eleanor, we're just worried about you being so far from family if something goes wrong, Amanda had said. What if you have a medical emergency in a country where the healthcare system is so different? We'd have no way to help you or even communicate with doctors about your needs. Over the following months, Michael and Amanda's resistance to my travel plans had become increasingly sophisticated and systematic. Though I'd initially interpreted their concerns as natural expressions of filial care, rather than evidence of a coordinated effort to control my independence. Every travel brochure I'd brought home had been met with detailed questions about safety protocols, medical facilities, travel insurance coverage, and emergency contact procedures. Michael had used his medical expertise to identify potential health risks associated with various destinations, while Amanda had researched crime statistics, political instability, and infrastructure challenges that could create problems for elderly travelers. Mom, I've been reading about altitude sickness in Peru, Michael had said when I'd mentioned interest in visiting Machu Picchu. At your age, the cardiovascular stress of high altitude could be serious. Maybe you should consider destinations that are easier on your system. When I'd expressed interest in an African safari, Amanda had immediately produced statistics about malaria risks, transportation safety, and the challenges of medical evacuation from remote locations. Eleanor, we're not trying to limit your adventures, Amanda had insisted. We just want to make sure you're making informed decisions about trips that could put your health and safety at risk. Their concerns had seemed reasonable and had been presented with apparent love and medical expertise, but the cumulative effect had been to make me question my own judgment about travel safety and to defer several trips I'd been excited about pursuing. Looking back now, I can see that their strategy had been remarkably sophisticated, using their professional credentials and family status to gradually undermine my confidence while positioning themselves as the reasonable voices of caution in contrast to my supposedly reckless travel ambitions. The morning that would change everything had begun like any other Tuesday in October, when I'd been excitedly reviewing the final details for my upcoming Japan trip, a journey I'd been planning for 8 months and had been determined to pursue despite Michael and Amanda's ongoing expressions of concern. Standing in my suite that morning, surrounded by travel guides, itineraries, and cultural preparation materials, I'd had no idea that my family's expressions of concern about my ambitious travel plans had actually been reconnaissance missions designed to identify ways to sabotage my independence while making their interference appear to be motivated by love rather than greed. The retired international business owner who'd spent decades navigating complex cultural challenges in dozens of countries was about to discover that the most dangerous obstacle to her dreams was living right under the same roof, disguised as caring family members who thought a 70-year-old woman should be grateful for their protection rather than pursuing her own adventures. Sometimes the people who claim they're worried about your safety are actually worried about their own financial security. Michael and Amanda were about to learn that the woman they'd dismissed as a reckless dreamer was actually someone with the resources, connections, and determination to ensure they regretted ever trying to clip her wings. The foundation they were planning to undermine, my financial independence, my travel experience, my business connections, and my absolute refusal to live according to other people's limitations, was actually going to become the platform from which I would launch the most expensive lesson they'd ever receive about respecting their elders. What Michael and Amanda hadn't anticipated was that their plan to control my retirement adventures had one fatal flaw. I was actually completely capable of making my own decisions, possessed of all my faculties, and equipped with the business acumen, international connections, and personal determination that had served me well throughout my career in dealing with people who'd thought they could manipulate someone they'd underestimated. The investigation that would follow would expose months of systematic deception, financial manipulation, and control so complete that it would transform my relationship with my family forever, while teaching them that some people fight back with consequences they never saw coming. Standing in my guest suite that October morning, still processing the subtle but persistent resistance I'd been encountering to my travel plans, I realized I needed to understand how I'd reached this point of family tension over something that should have been a source of celebration and support. But to comprehend the full scope of what was happening to me, you need to know about the life I'd built before Michael decided my adventures were too expensive for his comfort. A life of international business success, cultural sophistication, and the kind of financial wisdom that had made his systematic interference both possible and ultimately futile. My journey to that frustrating Tuesday morning had begun 68 years earlier, when I'd been born Eleanor Victoria Richardson, to parents who understood that a woman's education and independence were not optional luxuries, but essential foundations for a meaningful life. It was 1953, and the world was experiencing unprecedented changes as post-war prosperity created new opportunities for women who were willing to challenge traditional expectations and pursue ambitious goals. My father, Robert Richardson, had been a professor of economics at Yale University, specializing in international trade theory and post-war economic reconstruction. He'd spent his career studying the complex relationships between global commerce, cultural exchange, and economic development, and he'd instilled in me from an early age the understanding that business success required not just financial acumen, but genuine appreciation for different cultures and ways of thinking. Eleanor, my father had said during one of our regular dinner table discussions about world events, the future belongs to people who can think globally while acting locally. The businesses that will thrive in the coming decades will be those that understand how to build authentic relationships across cultural boundaries. My mother, Catherine Richardson, had been equally influential in shaping my understanding of what was possible for an educated woman. She'd earned a master's degree in art history from Radcliffe College in 1948, at a time when advanced education for women was still considered unusual, and she'd worked as a curator for the Yale University Art Gallery while raising me and my younger brother Thomas. "Darling," my mother had told me during my high school years, "never let anyone convince you that being feminine means being helpless or dependent. The most interesting women I know are those who've built their own careers, traveled extensively, and refused to limit their dreams based on other people's expectations." The Richardson household had been intellectually stimulating and culturally sophisticated in ways that had prepared me for the international business career I would eventually build. Dinner conversations had regularly included discussions of global politics, economic trends, art history, and cultural developments from around the world. Our home had been filled with artifacts from my parents' travels, books in multiple languages, and the kind of cosmopolitan atmosphere that had made the world seem accessible and exciting rather than foreign and frightening. By age 16, I'd already traveled to 12 countries with my parents, had developed conversational skills in French and Spanish, and had begun to understand that successful international business required much more than just buying and selling products. It required building genuine relationships based on mutual respect and cultural understanding. My academic journey had begun at Miss Porter's School in Farmington, Connecticut, one of the most prestigious preparatory schools for young women in the country. The school's emphasis on intellectual rigor, cultural sophistication, and leadership development had been exactly what I'd needed to prepare for the ambitious goals I'd been developing since childhood. At Miss Porter's, I'd excelled in languages, international relations, and economics, while also developing the social skills and cultural confidence that would serve me well in business settings throughout my career. The school's student body had included daughters of diplomats, business leaders, and cultural figures from around the world, providing me with early exposure to the kind of international perspective that would become crucial to my professional success. Miss Richardson, my economics teacher, had written in a recommendation letter that I'd found years later, demonstrates the rare combination of analytical intelligence and cultural sensitivity that characterizes natural leaders in international business. She has the intellectual capability to understand complex economic relationships and the personal skills to build meaningful partnerships across cultural boundaries. My senior thesis at Miss Porter's had focused on the post-war reconstruction of European textile industries and the opportunities for American businesses to develop mutually beneficial trading relationships with traditional manufacturers who were rebuilding their operations. The research had required correspondence with industry leaders in France, Italy, and England, and had given me my first taste of the complex negotiations and cultural diplomacy that would characterize my business career. Wellesley College had been the natural next step, offering the kind of rigorous academic program and sophisticated international perspective that would prepare me for graduate business education and eventual entrepreneurial success. Wellesley's international business program had been one of the most competitive and comprehensive in the country, requiring students to develop expertise in multiple languages, cultural studies, and economic analysis. During my 4 years at Wellesley, I'd maintained a 3.8 GPA while also studying abroad for a semester at the London School of Economics and completing internships with international trading companies in New York and Boston. The LSE experience had been particularly transformative, exposing me to economic theories and business practices from European perspectives that had broadened my understanding of global commerce. Eleanor has the intellectual curiosity and cultural adaptability that characterize successful international business professionals, my advisor at Wellesley had written. Her combination of analytical skills, language abilities, and genuine interest in cross-cultural communication makes her an ideal candidate for leadership roles in global commerce. My senior thesis at Wellesley had examined the potential for American businesses to develop sustainable trading relationships with artisan communities in developing countries, focusing on how international commerce could benefit both American consumers and traditional craftspeople in Asia, Africa, and South America. The research had required extensive correspondence with cultural anthropologists, economic development specialists, and business leaders who were pioneering new approaches to international trade. After graduating from Wellesley in 1975, I'd spent 2 years working for Harrison & Associates, a boutique consulting firm that specialized in helping American companies develop international business relationships. The position had been exactly what I'd needed to gain practical experience in the complex negotiations, cultural diplomacy, and logistical coordination that characterized successful international business operations. Harrison & Associates had clients ranging from small specialty importers to major corporations seeking to expand their global supply chains, and my role had involved everything from market research and cultural analysis to contract negotiation and relationship management. The work had required extensive travel, often spending 2 or 3 weeks per month in different countries, building relationships with manufacturers, suppliers, and cultural intermediaries who could facilitate successful business partnerships. Eleanor, you have a natural talent for cross-cultural communication, my supervisor at Harrison & Associates had observed after I'd successfully negotiated a complex textile supply agreement between a Massachusetts clothing manufacturer and a cooperative of women weavers in Guatemala. You understand that international business isn't just about contracts and shipping schedules. It's about building trust and mutual respect with people whose cultural background may be very different from your own. One of my most successful projects at Harrison & Associates had involved helping a Vermont furniture company develop relationships with traditional woodworkers in rural Mexico who could produce high-quality handcrafted furniture for the American market. The project had required 6 months of travel between Vermont and Mexico, learning about traditional woodworking techniques, understanding the economic needs of the artisan communities, and developing a supply chain that could deliver authentic, handcrafted products while providing fair compensation to the craftspeople. Miss Richardson has demonstrated exceptional ability in facilitating complex international business relationships, the Vermont Furniture Company's president had written in a testimonial letter. Her cultural sensitivity and business acumen made it possible for us to develop partnerships that benefit both our company and the artisan communities we work with. Mr. and Mrs. Hartwell, you understand that our work represents not just products, but cultural heritage, the director of a women's pottery cooperative in Salé had told us during one of our annual buying trips. When Americans purchase our ceramics, they're supporting traditional arts and helping our community preserve techniques that have been passed down for generations. By the mid-1990s, Hartwell International Imports had achieved revenues of $8 million annually and had been recognized as one of the most innovative and culturally responsible importing companies in North America. Our client base had grown to include major department stores, boutique retailers, interior design firms, and cultural institutions that valued our expertise in sourcing authentic, high-quality products that couldn't be found through conventional wholesale channels. The financial success had been gratifying, but more important had been the recognition that we'd built a business model that created genuine value for all stakeholders: suppliers who received fair compensation for their work, customers who gained access to unique cultural products, and our own company that had achieved profitable growth while maintaining ethical business practices. Hartwell International Imports has demonstrated that international trade can be both profitable and culturally responsible, a feature article in International Trade Journal had noted. Charles and Eleanor Hartwell have built their success on authentic relationships with artisan communities and deep understanding of the cultural contexts that influence traditional crafts. Industry recognition had included invitations to speak at trade conferences, appointments to cultural exchange organizations, and consulting opportunities with government agencies that were developing policies to support traditional crafts in developing countries. The recognition had validated our approach to international business, while also creating new opportunities for expansion and cultural impact. The Hartwells have pioneered a model of international commerce that creates mutual benefits rather than exploitative relationships, a professor at Harvard Business School had written in a case study about our company. Their success demonstrates that businesses can achieve profitable growth while also supporting cultural preservation and economic development in traditional artisan communities. The Harvard Business School case study had been particularly meaningful because it had provided academic validation for business practices that we'd developed through practical experience and cultural sensitivity rather than formal business theory. The case study had been used in MBA programs throughout the country, exposing future business leaders to alternatives to conventional approaches to international commerce. Throughout our business career, Charles and I had maintained our commitment to travel as education and cultural enrichment rather than just business obligation. Every supplier visit had also been an opportunity for cultural exploration, learning about history, art, traditional foods, and social customs that had enriched our personal lives while also enhancing our business relationships. Our approach to business travel had been to spend at least twice as much time in each country as was strictly necessary for business meetings, allowing us to explore cultural sites, attend traditional performances, study local art forms, and develop friendships with people outside the business community. This approach had not only enhanced our cultural knowledge, but had also strengthened our business relationships by demonstrating genuine respect for and interest in the cultures we were working with. Mr. and Mrs. Hartwell, you are not typical American business people, a traditional musician in Rajasthan had told us during one of our buying trips to India. Most foreign buyers visit our workshops for a few hours and leave, but you stay to learn about our music, our festivals, our way of life. This shows respect that makes us proud to work with you. The cultural immersion aspect of our travels had been particularly important in developing the deep knowledge necessary to market authentic cultural products effectively to American consumers. We'd needed to understand not just the technical aspects of how products were made, but the cultural meanings, traditional uses, and historical contexts that gave them significance and value. Our photography from these travels had filled dozens of albums that documented not just products and suppliers, but cultural experiences, architectural details, traditional costumes, religious ceremonies, and daily life scenes that had provided rich background for our marketing efforts and customer education initiatives. Charles and Eleanor's cultural knowledge adds so much value to the products they import, an interior designer who had been one of our long-term customers had observed. When they sell you a piece of Moroccan pottery, they can tell you about the traditional techniques, the cultural significance of the patterns, and the community where it was made. You're not just buying a decorative object, you're gaining access to authentic cultural knowledge. As our business had achieved success and industry recognition, Charles and I had also become mentors to younger entrepreneurs who were interested in developing ethical approaches to international commerce. We'd regularly spoken at business schools, participated in trade association conferences, and consulted with startup companies that were seeking to build culturally responsible business models. The most important lesson we can share with young entrepreneurs, I'd often said during these speaking engagements, is that sustainable business success requires building authentic relationships based on mutual respect and shared values. You can't create lasting value by exploiting cultural differences or taking advantage of economic disparities. Our mentoring activities had included hosting internship programs that brought business students to work with our company during summer breaks, providing them with hands-on experience in international commerce, while also exposing them to the cultural and ethical dimensions of global trade. Many of these interns had gone on to successful careers in international business, often crediting their experience with Hartwell International Imports as formative in developing their own approach to ethical business practices. Working with Eleanor and Charles taught me that business success and cultural responsibility aren't contradictory goals, one former intern had written years later. Their example showed me that you can build profitable enterprises while also supporting traditional crafts and contributing to cultural preservation. The mentoring relationships had been personally rewarding, providing us with ongoing connections to younger professionals who shared our values and were carrying forward our approach to international business in their own careers. These relationships had also kept us connected to new trends and emerging opportunities in global commerce. Throughout our business success, Charles and I had remained committed to providing Michael with every possible advantage while also teaching him the values and work ethic that had made our achievements possible. We'd included Michael in our business travels from an early age, exposing him to different cultures and international perspectives that had shaped his understanding of the world and his own potential role in it. Mom and Dad, traveling with you has taught me that success comes from understanding and respecting people who are different from you, Michael had said during his high school graduation speech. You've shown me that education isn't just about what you learn in classrooms. It's about developing cultural knowledge and building authentic relationships with people from all backgrounds. Michael's exposure to our business operations had also given him practical understanding of entrepreneurship, international commerce, and the importance of ethical business practices. He'd often accompanied us to trade shows, supplier meetings, and customer presentations, developing early appreciation for the complexity and cultural dimensions of global business. Michael has been incredibly fortunate to grow up in a family that values both business success and cultural education. His high school guidance counselor had observed. His international experience and business knowledge give him advantages that will serve him well regardless of what career path he chooses. The financial investment in Michael's medical education had been substantial, but it had been consistent with our family's values about education as the foundation for a meaningful life. We'd viewed the medical school expenses not as financial burden but as investment in Michael's ability to contribute meaningfully to society while achieving the kind of professional success that would provide security for his own family. As Hartwell International Imports had achieved maturity and financial success, Charles and I had begun planning for retirement that would allow us to pursue the extensive leisure travel that our business obligations had never quite permitted. We dreamed of spending months in places we'd only briefly visited for work, exploring cultural sites and artistic traditions with the kind of depth and leisure that business travel had never allowed. "Eleanor, when we retire, I want to spend 3 months in Morocco studying traditional architecture and design," Charles had said during one of our planning conversations. "We visited so many workshops and met so many artisans, but we've never had time to really understand the historical and cultural context that influence their work." Our retirement travel plans had included extended stays in Japan, India, Peru, and Italy, countries where our business relationships had provided introductions to cultural experts and traditional artists who could offer insights far beyond typical tourist experiences. We'd also planned to visit places that had never been part of our business operations, but that had always interested us from cultural and historical perspectives. The sale of Hartwell International Imports in 2021 had provided the financial foundation for these ambitious travel plans, generating $2.8 million that had been invested in ways that would support comfortable retirement while preserving capital for the extensive travel we'd been planning for years. But Charles's sudden death just 6 months after our retirement had transformed these shared dreams into a personal mission that had become my primary source of purpose and meaning in widowhood. Every trip I'd planned since Charles's death had been both a way to honor our shared travel dreams and a means of continuing the cultural education and exploration that had always been central to our relationship. Standing in my guest suite that October morning, surrounded by travel planning materials for my upcoming Japan trip, I'd had no understanding that the son I'd invested in so heavily was viewing my travel budget as a threat to his own financial security, rather than as evidence of the healthy independence and cultural curiosity that had always characterized our family's approach to life. The international business expertise, cultural knowledge, financial resources, and personal determination that Michael was trying to control were actually going to become the foundation for teaching him the most expensive lesson of his professional life about respecting the dreams and independence of someone who'd spent decades proving that age was no barrier to adventure and achievement. Sometimes the people who think they know what's best for you are actually the people who understand you least. Michael was about to discover that underestimating a 70-year-old woman who'd built an international business empire was the biggest mistake he'd ever made in his life. Standing in my guest suite that October morning, still processing Michael and Amanda's increasingly systematic resistance to my travel plans, I couldn't help but remember how different things had been just 5 years ago, when Michael had first proposed the idea of my moving into their guest suite and had spoken with such enthusiasm about supporting my retirement dreams and travel aspirations. It was a conversation that had taken place during what I now recognize as the golden beginning of our adult relationship, a period when Michael seemed genuinely committed to honoring the sacrifices Charles and I had made for his success, while building the kind of multi-generational family bonds that would enrich all our lives. The conversation had occurred in March 2021, just 2 weeks after Charles's funeral, when I'd been struggling with the overwhelming loneliness and practical challenges of living alone in our large family estate for the first time in 46 years of marriage. Everything about my daily routine had required painful adjustment, from cooking meals for one person to making decisions about household maintenance and financial management, without Charles's partnership and perspective. Michael had visited me that Sunday afternoon, arriving with a bouquet of white roses and a home-cooked meal that Amanda had prepared, a gesture that had touched me deeply during those difficult weeks when even simple tasks like grocery shopping had felt overwhelming and emotionally fraught. "Mom, I've been thinking about your situation," Michael had said, as we'd sat in our living room surrounded by the condolence cards and flower arrangements that had been arriving daily from friends and business associates who'd respected Charles and understood the magnitude of my loss. "This house is too big for one person, and I worry about you being isolated here when you're dealing with grief." Michael's concern had seemed genuine and thoughtful, reflecting the kind of caring attention that had characterized our relationship throughout his childhood and young adulthood. He'd always been sensitive to emotional dynamics and had demonstrated remarkable maturity in responding to family challenges and transitions. "I know Dad had big travel plans for your retirement," Michael had continued, "and I don't want his death to mean that you have to give up those dreams. But I also think you need family support and connection during this transition period." The proposal he'd outlined had seemed like the perfect solution to multiple challenges I'd been facing. Rather than remaining isolated in a house that had become too large and emotionally difficult to maintain, I could move into their guest suite and have the best of both worlds: complete independence and privacy, combined with family proximity and support. "Amanda and I have been discussing this extensively," Michael had explained, "and we think the guest suite would be perfect for you. It's completely self-contained, so you'd have total autonomy, but you'd be close enough that we could help with anything you needed. Plus, Sophia would benefit enormously from having her grandmother nearby." The financial arrangements he'd proposed had been generous and had demonstrated genuine concern for my comfort and security. The below-market rent, inclusion of utilities and household services, and access to the estate's amenities had represented substantial value, while also allowing me to maintain the dignity of contributing financially to the household, rather than being treated as a charity case. "Mom, we want this to be a partnership that benefits everyone," Michael had said. "You'd have a beautiful place to live with complete independence. Sophia would have regular access to her grandmother and Amanda, and I would have the peace of mind that comes from knowing you're secure and connected to family." But what had impressed me most about Michael's proposal had been his explicit support for my travel aspirations and his understanding that retirement should be about pursuing dreams rather than accepting limitations. "Dad talked to me extensively about the travel plans you'd been making together," Michael had continued. "I know how much those trips meant to both of you, and I want to make sure you feel supported in pursuing those experiences. Having family nearby doesn't mean giving up your independence. It means having a secure base for all the adventures you want to pursue." During those first months after I'd moved into the guest suite, Michael and Amanda had shown remarkable enthusiasm for my travel plans and had seemed genuinely excited about supporting my adventures in ways that honored both Charles's memory and my own needs for cultural exploration and personal growth. My first major trip after the move had been a 2-week cultural tour of Morocco in September 2021, a journey that had been both emotionally healing and practically successful in demonstrating that I could travel safely and enjoyably as a solo senior traveler. The trip had been organized by exclusive cultural expeditions and had included everything from cooking classes with Berber women in the Atlas Mountains to guided tours of Islamic architecture in Fez and Meknes. "Mom, tell us everything about Morocco," Michael had said enthusiastically when I'd returned from the trip with hundreds of photographs and dozens of stories about the cultural experiences that had enriched my understanding of North African history and traditions. "I want to hear about the places you visited, the people you met, and what you learned about traditional crafts and architecture." Michael's genuine interest in my travel experiences had been deeply gratifying, reflecting the kind of intellectual curiosity and cultural appreciation that Charles and I had tried to instill in him throughout his childhood. He'd ask detailed questions about the historical sites I'd visited, the traditional arts I'd studied, and the relationships I'd developed with other travelers who shared my passion for authentic cultural exploration. Amanda had been equally supportive, expressing admiration for my independence and cultural adventurousness, while also offering practical assistance with travel planning and logistics. "Eleanor, I'm so impressed by your courage in pursuing these adventures," Amanda had said as we'd looked through my Morocco photographs together. "Traveling solo to foreign countries requires the kind of confidence and cultural knowledge that most people your age would never attempt. You're an inspiration for what retirement can be when you refuse to accept limitations." Amanda had offered to help with travel research, suggesting travel insurance options and medical preparation strategies that would ensure my safety while also supporting my independence. Her background in pharmaceutical sales had given her useful knowledge about international health precautions and medication management that had been helpful in planning complex trips to countries with different medical standards and healthcare systems. I can help you research medical facilities and health precautions for wherever you want to travel, Amanda had offered. My work in pharmaceuticals has given me access to databases about international healthcare that could be useful for your trip planning. The success of the Morocco trip had encouraged me to begin planning more ambitious journeys, and Michael and Amanda's continued support had given me confidence that my living arrangement would provide the perfect foundation for pursuing the extensive travel that had become my primary source of joy and purpose in retirement. My second major trip had been a 3-week cultural exploration of Peru in March 2022, including visits to Machu Picchu, the Sacred Valley, and colonial cities like Cusco and Arequipa. The trip had required more complex planning than Morocco, involving altitude considerations, specialized equipment, and coordination between multiple tour operators and accommodation providers. "Mom, Peru sounds absolutely fascinating," Michael had said when I'd shared my preliminary itinerary with the family. The combination of Inca history, colonial architecture, and contemporary indigenous culture sounds like exactly the kind of immersive experience that Dad would have loved to share with you. Michael's reference to Charles had been particularly meaningful, acknowledging that my travel was not just personal indulgence, but a way of honoring the shared dreams that had sustained our marriage and had been interrupted by his unexpected death. Michael's understanding of the emotional significance of travel had demonstrated the kind of empathy and maturity that had made me proud of the man he'd become. "I know these trips are expensive," Michael had continued, "but they're exactly what you should be doing with your retirement. You and Dad built substantial wealth specifically so you could pursue these kinds of cultural experiences, and I think it's wonderful that you're following through on those plans." Michael's explicit acknowledgement that travel expenses were an appropriate use of my retirement funds had been reassuring, especially given the substantial costs involved in the kind of luxury cultural tours that provided the safety, comfort, and educational value I was seeking as a solo senior traveler. The Peru trip had been even more successful than Morocco, providing profound cultural experiences while also demonstrating my capability to handle complex travel logistics and challenging physical conditions. The altitude at Machu Picchu had required careful preparation and gradual acclimatization, but I'd managed the challenges successfully while gaining incredible insights into Inca engineering and Andean cultural traditions. "Eleanor, your Peru photographs are absolutely stunning," Amanda had said when I'd returned with extensive documentation of ancient architecture, traditional textiles, and contemporary indigenous arts. "The fact that you handled the altitude and hiking requirements shows that age really is just a number when you maintain your health and pursue your interests with passion." Amanda's recognition of my physical capabilities had been important validation, especially since she had medical knowledge through her pharmaceutical work that gave her credibility in assessing health and safety considerations for senior travelers. The success of my Morocco and Peru trips had led to a period of genuine family celebration of my cultural achievements and travel experiences. Michael and Amanda had regularly invited friends and neighbors to dinner parties where I'd been encouraged to share stories and photographs from my adventures, treating my travel experiences as sources of family pride rather than concerns about inappropriate risk-taking. "Our neighbor, Mrs. Patterson, was so impressed by your travel stories," Amanda had told me after one of these dinner parties. "She said she'd never met a woman your age who was pursuing such ambitious cultural adventures. You're changing people's perceptions about what's possible in retirement." The dinner party conversations had provided opportunities for me to share not just travel stories, but also the cultural knowledge and international perspectives I'd developed through decades of business travel and recent leisure exploration. Guests had been genuinely interested in learning about traditional arts, historical sites, and contemporary cultural developments in countries they'd never visited but were curious about. "Eleanor has such sophisticated understanding of international cultures," one of Michael's medical colleagues had observed after hearing about my textile studies in Morocco and architectural research in Peru. "Her travel experiences provide the kind of cultural education that most of us never have the opportunity to pursue. These social acknowledgments of my cultural expertise had been deeply satisfying, validating the substantial investments I'd been making in travel, while also demonstrating that my adventures were contributing to our family's social reputation and cultural credibility within the Greenwich community. Michael had often used these dinner parties to express pride in my independence and cultural achievements, presenting me as an example of successful aging and retirement planning that other families could aspire to emulate. My mother has shown that retirement doesn't have to mean limitation or decline, Michael had said during one particularly memorable dinner party. She's pursuing cultural education and international travel with more energy and sophistication than most people half her age. Her example shows what's possible when you maintain your health, pursue your interests, and refuse to accept other people's assumptions about aging. During this golden period of our relationship, Michael and Amanda had continued to express gratitude for the substantial financial support I'd provided throughout Michael's medical education and early career development. They'd frequently acknowledged that their current lifestyle and professional success had been made possible by the educational investments Charles and I had made over the years. Mom, Amanda, and I were discussing our financial situation last night, Michael had said during one of our regular family dinners, and we realized that every major achievement in our lives has been supported by your and Dad's generosity. Medical school, residency, establishing my practice, purchasing this house. None of it would have been possible without your investment in my education and career. Michael's recognition of our financial contributions had been accompanied by expressions of commitment to ensuring that I felt supported and valued as I pursued my own retirement goals and travel aspirations. We want to make sure you know that you'll always have our support for whatever adventures you want to pursue, Michael had continued. You and Dad sacrificed for years to make my success possible. And now it's our turn to make sure you have everything you need to enjoy the retirement you've earned. Amanda had been equally explicit in acknowledging the role that our financial support had played in their family's success and in expressing commitment to supporting my independence and travel plans. Eleanor, Michael, and I recognize that our entire lifestyle has been built on the foundation you and Charles provided, Amanda had said during one of our private conversations. The house, Michael's practice, our financial security, all of it. It exists because you invested in Michael's education and gave him opportunities that most families couldn't afford. Amanda's acknowledgement had been accompanied by practical offers of assistance with travel planning, medical preparation, and logistics coordination that would support my independence while also providing family backup for emergency situations. I want you to know that you can pursue any travel plans that interest you, Amanda had continued. Michael and I will handle any practical arrangements you need, and will always be available if you need support or assistance while you're traveling. One of the most meaningful aspects of the golden period in our family relationship had been the development of my relationship with Sophia, who'd been 4 years old when I'd moved into the guest suite and had quickly become accustomed to having her grandmother available for regular interaction and cultural education. Sophia had been fascinated by my travel photographs and stories, often requesting bedtime stories about the places I'd visited and the people I'd met during my cultural explorations. Her curiosity about different countries and cultures had reminded me of Michael's childhood interest in the international aspects of our business travels. Grandma Eleanor, tell me about the pottery ladies in Morocco, Sophia would say as we'd looked through photograph albums together. I want to hear about how they make the bowls with all the pretty patterns. These storytelling sessions had provided opportunities for me to share not just travel experiences, but also cultural knowledge and historical information that was enriching Sophia's education while strengthening our intergenerational bonds. Sophia is so fortunate to have a grandmother who can teach her about different cultures and ways of life, Amanda had observed during one of these sessions. Most children her age never have exposure to authentic international perspectives. Your travel experiences are giving her educational advantages that will influence her understanding of the world for the rest of her life. Michael had been equally appreciative of the cultural education I was providing for Sophia, recognizing that my international experiences were contributing to her development in ways that complemented the formal education she was receiving at her private school. Mom, Sophia's teachers have commented on her sophisticated understanding of geography and world cultures, Michael had told me. They say she talks about countries and traditions that most kindergartners have never heard of. Your influence is already shaping her into a more globally aware person. The relationship with Sophia had also provided practical motivation for my travel planning, as I'd begun selecting destinations and cultural experiences that would translate into meaningful educational content I could share with her when I returned from each trip. "Grandma, where are you going next?" Sophia would ask as I'd prepared for upcoming trips. "Will you bring me pictures and stories about the people there?" Her enthusiasm for my adventures had been both heartwarming and validating, demonstrating that my travel was contributing to family relationships rather than creating distance or concern. The support Michael and Amanda had shown for my travel adventures during this golden period had also contributed to enhanced social status and community recognition within Greenwich's sophisticated social circles. My cultural experiences and international travel had become sources of conversation at community events, charity functions, and social gatherings where people were impressed by the scope and sophistication of my retirement activities. "Eleanor Hartwell is such an inspiration," I'd overheard one of Amanda's friends saying at a charity luncheon. "Most women her age are settling into quiet retirement, but she's pursuing international travel and cultural education with more energy than people half her age." The community recognition had been personally satisfying while also reflecting positively on Michael and Amanda's family reputation and social standing. Their support for my independence and cultural adventures had demonstrated their own sophistication and family values in ways that enhanced their social credibility within Greenwich's competitive social environment. "Michael and Amanda are so enlightened in their approach to family relationships," another community member had observed. "Most adult children would be worried about their elderly mother traveling alone to foreign countries, but they understand that Eleanor's international experience and cultural knowledge make her perfectly capable of managing complex travel independently." The social validation had provided additional motivation for Michael and Amanda to continue supporting my travel plans, while also demonstrating to the broader community that our family valued independence, cultural education, and intergenerational respect rather than overprotective limitation of senior family members. During this golden period, Michael and Amanda had not only supported my completed travel experiences, but had also encouraged me to develop ambitious plans for future adventures that would continue building on the cultural education and international exploration that had become central to my retirement identity. "Mom, where would you like to travel next?" Michael had asked after my successful return from Peru. "You've conquered Morocco and Peru. What other destinations are on your list?" The encouragement to develop future travel plans had been accompanied by practical offers of assistance with research, planning, and logistics coordination that would ensure my continued success in managing complex international travel as a solo senior adventurer. "I can help you research destinations and tour operators," Amanda had offered. "My pharmaceutical background gives me access to medical and safety information that could be useful for evaluating different travel options." Their support had enabled me to begin developing the ambitious Japan itinerary that would become the source of our eventual conflict. Though during this golden period, their enthusiasm for my travel planning had seemed completely genuine and sustainable. "Japan sounds absolutely fascinating," Michael had said when I'd first mentioned my interest in exploring Japanese cultural traditions and contemporary society. "The combination of ancient traditions and modern innovation would provide exactly the kind of cultural complexity that you enjoy studying." Amanda had been equally supportive of the Japan plans, offering to help with research about Japanese customs, language basics, and practical considerations for senior travelers in a country known for its sophisticated infrastructure and hospitality industry. "Eleanor, Japan would be perfect for you," Amanda had said. Their respect for elderly people and emphasis on cultural traditions would make it an ideal destination for someone with your international experience and cultural knowledge. The financial planning discussions during this golden period had also demonstrated Michael and Amanda's apparent respect for my independence and their understanding that my travel expenses were appropriate uses of the wealth Charles and I had accumulated specifically to support our retirement dreams. Mom, I want you to know that Amanda and I support whatever decisions you make about spending your money, Michael had said during one of our family financial discussions. You and Dad worked incredibly hard to build wealth specifically so you could enjoy your retirement. We think your travel experiences are exactly what you should be doing with those resources. Michael's explicit support for my travel spending had been particularly important, given the substantial costs involved in the kind of luxury cultural tours that provided the safety, comfort, and educational value I required as a solo senior traveler. The tours typically cost between $8,000 and $15,000 per trip, representing significant portions of my annual discretionary income, but providing experiences that couldn't be obtained through conventional travel arrangements. We've never questioned your travel expenses because we understand that authentic cultural education requires investment in high-quality tour operators and accommodations, Amanda had added. The experiences you're having are priceless in terms of personal enrichment and cultural knowledge. The estate planning discussions during this period had also been conducted with apparent respect for my autonomy and recognition that my travel expenses would reduce the eventual inheritance while providing immediate benefits that honored Charles's memory and my own cultural interests. Mom, Amanda, and I want you to spend your money on whatever brings you joy and fulfillment, Michael had said. We're both successful professionals with secure incomes. We don't need to inherit wealth from you. We need to know that you're living the retirement you and Dad planned together. These conversations had given me confidence that my financial decisions were supported by family members who understood the importance of pursuing retirement dreams rather than preserving wealth for inheritance purposes. By the summer of 2022, our family relationships had reached what I now recognize as their peak harmony, with regular gatherings that celebrated shared values, mutual support, and genuine affection that seemed to validate all the investments Charles and I had made in building strong family bonds. Family dinners had become weekly traditions that included sophisticated conversations about my travel experiences, Michael's medical work, Amanda's pharmaceutical career, and Sophia's educational development. These conversations had demonstrated the kind of intellectual engagement and cultural sophistication that had characterized our family's approach to life. I love our family dinners, Sophia had said during one particularly enjoyable evening. Grandma Eleanor always has interesting stories. Daddy tells us about helping people with their hearts, and Mommy knows about medicines that help people feel better. The family harmony had been accompanied by practical collaboration on household management, childcare assistance, and social activities that had benefited everyone while maintaining appropriate boundaries and respect for individual autonomy. This living arrangement has worked out even better than we hoped, Michael had observed during one of our family conversations. Mom has the independence and travel opportunities she wants. Sophia has regular access to her grandmother's wisdom and cultural knowledge, and Amanda and I have the peace of mind that comes from knowing family is nearby. The mutual satisfaction with our arrangement had seemed genuine and sustainable, providing the foundation for long-term family relationships that would support everyone's individual goals while maintaining strong intergenerational bonds. Looking back now, I realized that this golden period had represented the peak of Michael and Amanda's genuine support for my independence, before their perspective had begun shifting toward viewing my travel expenses as threats to their own financial security, rather than as evidence of successful retirement planning and cultural enrichment. The transition from support to control had been so gradual that I'd initially missed the warning signs, interpreting their increasing questions and concerns as natural expressions of caring rather than evidence of a systematic campaign to limit my independence and redirect my travel budget toward their own financial priorities. But standing in my guest suite that October morning, reviewing the resistance I'd been encountering to my Japan travel plans, I was beginning to understand that the golden period of our relationship had ended, and that Michael and Amanda's true feelings about my travel expenses were about to be revealed in ways that would change our family dynamics forever. Sometimes the people who seem most supportive of your dreams are actually calculating how to take control of them. Michael and Amanda were about to learn that the woman they'd begun treating as a financial liability was actually someone with the intelligence, resources, and determination to ensure they regretted ever trying to limit her freedom. The foundation of trust and mutual respect they were planning to undermine was actually going to become the platform from which I would launch the most expensive lesson they'd ever receive about the consequences of betraying someone who'd spent decades proving that respect and independence weren't optional. Standing in my guest suite that October morning, still processing the mounting resistance I'd been encountering to my Japan travel plans, I felt the last fragments of my trust in Michael and Amanda crumbling away. But what I discovered when I decided to investigate the full scope of their interference would transform my disappointment and frustration into a cold, calculating determination that would change everything forever. The breaking point had come 3 days earlier, during what should have been a routine family dinner where I'd shared my finalized Japan itinerary and travel arrangements. Instead of the enthusiasm and support I'd grown accustomed to during our golden period, Michael and Amanda's response had been openly hostile and controlling in ways that had made their true feelings about my independence impossible to ignore. "Mom, we need to talk seriously about this Japan trip," Michael had said, his tone carrying the authoritative edge he typically reserved for delivering difficult medical diagnoses to patients. "Amanda and I have been discussing your travel plans, and we're genuinely concerned that you're taking unnecessary risks that could have serious consequences." The shift in his language from supportive to concerned had been immediate and unmistakable, representing a complete reversal of the enthusiasm he'd shown for my previous travel adventures. Gone was the pride in my cultural achievements and independence. In its place was the kind of patronizing concern that suggested he'd decided I was no longer capable of making my own decisions. "Michael, I've traveled to over 40 countries during my business career," I'd replied, trying to keep my voice calm despite the surge of anger I'd felt at his sudden change in attitude. "I've successfully completed complex solo trips to Morocco and Peru since your father's death. I don't understand why you're suddenly treating me like I'm incompetent." Amanda had immediately joined the attack, her pharmaceutical knowledge weaponized to undermine my confidence in my own physical and mental capabilities. "Eleanor, we're not questioning your past abilities," Amanda had said, her voice carrying the kind of false sweetness that healthcare professionals use when delivering unwelcome news. "But international travel becomes more challenging with age, and Japan presents specific risks that we don't think you've fully considered." The litany of concerns they'd presented had been remarkably comprehensive and sophisticated, suggesting they'd spent considerable time researching ways to make my travel plans seem dangerous and irresponsible. Language barriers, medical emergency protocols, transportation safety, cultural misunderstandings, and dietary complications had all been presented as insurmountable obstacles that proved I was being reckless in pursuing this trip. "Mom, what if you have a medical emergency in a country where you don't speak the language?" Michael had pressed. "What if you get lost in Tokyo or have a medication reaction? Amanda and I would have no way to help you, and the communication barriers could delay critical medical care." The most devastating aspect of their intervention had been the way they'd systematically dismantled every aspect of my travel planning, transforming what had been a carefully researched and professionally organized cultural expedition into evidence of dangerous irresponsibility that required immediate family intervention. "Eleanor, we've been researching the tour company you've chosen," Amanda had said, producing a folder of printed materials that suggested they'd been investigating my travel arrangements without my knowledge. "While Exclusive Cultural Expeditions has good reviews, they don't have specific protocols for managing medical emergencies involving elderly clients with complex health needs." The phrase elderly clients with complex health needs had been particularly insulting, given that I was a healthy 70-year-old woman with no serious medical conditions beyond well-controlled blood pressure that required only basic medication management. "Amanda, I'm not an invalid," I'd said, my voice rising despite my efforts to remain calm. "I manage my own medication, drive my own car, handle my own finances, and have successfully traveled internationally for months at a time. I don't have complex health needs. I have one blood pressure medication that I've been taking successfully for years." But Michael and Amanda had been prepared for my objections, responding with what was clearly a coordinated strategy designed to position them as the reasonable voices of medical expertise in contrast to my supposedly unrealistic assessment of my own capabilities. "Mom, denial about age-related limitations is actually a common symptom of early cognitive decline," Michael had said, using his medical authority to suggest that my resistance to their control was itself evidence of incompetence. "Many elderly people don't recognize when their judgment becomes impaired, which is exactly why family members need to intervene for their safety." The suggestion that my resistance to their control was evidence of cognitive decline had been so insulting and manipulative that I'd left the dinner table without responding, returning to my guest suite with a mixture of anger and determination that had made sleep impossible. But lying awake that night, replaying the conversation and analyzing their coordinated attack on my competence, I'd begun to suspect that their sudden change in attitude wasn't spontaneous concern, but evidence of a more systematic campaign to control my travel spending. The next morning, while Michael was at the hospital and Amanda was taking Sophia to school, I'd made a decision that would expose the full scope of their betrayal. I'd entered their home office to look for evidence of whatever planning had preceded their dinner. Confrontation. What I'd found in Amanda's laptop, which she'd carelessly left open on the desk, had been more devastating than anything I could have imagined. A detailed spreadsheet titled Eleanor Travel Budget Analysis had contained not just records of my travel expenses over the past 2 years, but projections of how much money my excessive travel would cost their eventual inheritance over the next decade. The spreadsheet had been remarkably sophisticated, tracking every aspect of my travel spending with the precision of a forensic accountant. Morocco trip, $12,400. Peru expedition, $15,800. Planned Japan journey, $18,200. Total travel expenses for 2021-2023, $46,400. Projected annual travel costs, $25,000. Estimated impact on inheritance over 10 years, $250,000, but the financial analysis had been accompanied by email correspondence that had revealed the true scope of their deception and manipulation. Messages between Michael and Amanda had documented months of strategic planning to limit my travel independence while making their interference appear medically justified rather than financially motivated. Michael, one of Amanda's emails had, "Read, I've been researching age-related travel risks and medical complications. If we present these concerns properly, we can convince Eleanor that international travel is becoming too dangerous for someone her age. The key is to frame our intervention as medical necessity rather than financial concern." Michael's responses had been equally calculated and manipulative. "I can use my medical credentials to identify potential health risks associated with elderly travel. If we focus on emergency medical scenarios and communication barriers, we can make her Japan trip seem irresponsible and dangerous." The email trail had revealed that they'd been coordinating their attack for over 6 months, researching travel insurance limitations, international medical evacuation procedures, and age-related health risks that could be used to justify their interference with my independence. But the most shocking discovery had been a detailed financial plan they'd developed for redirecting my travel budget toward improvements to their estate and Sophia's education expenses. The money I would save by canceling international travel could be invested in a guest cottage expansion, landscape improvements, and enhanced educational opportunities for Sophia that would benefit the entire family. If we can convince Eleanor that international travel is too risky, Amanda had written, we can redirect her travel budget toward home improvements and family investments that will preserve value rather than being wasted on expensive trips. She'll soon be too old to enjoy anyway. Continuing my investigation of their computer files, I'd discovered evidence that their interference had been far more systematic and invasive than I'd realized. They'd been monitoring my travel planning activities, researching my chosen destinations, and developing targeted arguments against each trip I'd been considering. A folder labeled Eleanor Travel Research had contained detailed analyses of every destination I'd mentioned over the past year, including crime statistics, political instability reports, healthcare system evaluations, and infrastructure assessments that could be used to make any international travel seem dangerous and irresponsible. Japan analysis, earthquake risks, language barriers, medication availability concerns, emergency medical evacuation challenges had been followed by similar assessments for Italy, India, Egypt, and New Zealand. Every destination I'd expressed interest in exploring, but even more disturbing had been evidence that they'd been interfering with my travel arrangements behind my back. Email correspondence with exclusive cultural expeditions had revealed that Amanda had contacted the tour company, identifying herself as my daughter-in-law, and expressing family concerns about my ability to handle the physical and logistical demands of international travel. Dear Exclusive Cultural Expeditions, one email had read, I'm writing regarding my mother-in-law Eleanor Hartwell's upcoming Japan tour. While we support her interest in travel, our family has concerns about whether she fully understands the physical demands and potential medical risks associated with this itinerary. Could you please provide additional information about your protocols for managing elderly clients with health considerations? The tour company's response had been professional, but had clearly been influenced by Amanda's concerns. Thank you for contacting us about Mrs. Hartwell's reservation. We appreciate family members who are involved in ensuring client safety. We will contact Mrs. Hartwell directly to discuss additional travel insurance options and medical preparation requirements that might address your concerns. This unauthorized interference with my travel arrangements had been a violation of my privacy and autonomy so profound that it had transformed my anger into something much colder and more determined. They hadn't just been expressing concerns about my travel plans, they'd been actively sabotaging my relationship with professional travel providers while presenting themselves as caring family members. But the most shocking discovery had been in a folder labeled Travel Insurance Documentation, which had contained confirmation emails for travel insurance policies that I'd never seen before. Amanda had been purchasing comprehensive travel insurance policies for my trips and then canceling them within the allowable review period, ensuring that I would travel without coverage while creating documentation that could be used to demonstrate the risks I was taking. Policy cancellation confirmation. Eleanor Hartwell, Japan Cultural Tour coverage, had been dated just 3 days earlier, canceling the $2,400 comprehensive coverage policy I'd thought was protecting my Japan travel investment. The cancellation reason listed had been family medical concerns, policyholder deemed high risk for international travel. The pattern had been consistent across all my recent travel. Amanda had been secretly purchasing and then canceling travel insurance policies, creating a paper trail that suggested I was either too irresponsible to maintain proper coverage or too high risk for insurance companies to cover reliably. This level of deception and manipulation had been so sophisticated and systematic that I'd realized I was dealing with people who'd been planning to control my independence for months while maintaining the pretense of caring family support. That afternoon, I'd made the first of several phone calls that would form the foundation of my response to their betrayal. My first call had been to Patricia Williams, an elder law attorney whose expertise in financial abuse cases had been recommended by my longtime financial advisor. Mrs. Hartwell, Patricia had said after I'd explained the situation, what you're describing is a classic case of financial elder abuse disguised as family concern. Your son and daughter-in-law have been systematically undermining your independence, while positioning themselves to control your assets for their own benefit. Patricia had explained that the insurance manipulation, travel interference, and financial monitoring I'd discovered constituted clear evidence of a coordinated campaign to restrict my autonomy and redirect my resources toward their priorities rather than my own stated preferences. The fact that they've been researching travel risks and contacting your tour operators without your permission shows premeditation and systematic planning, Patricia had continued. This isn't spontaneous family concern, it's calculated interference, designed to justify increased control over your financial decisions. My second call had been to Dr. Sarah Chen, a geriatric psychiatrist who specialized in competency evaluations and could provide professional documentation of my mental acuity and decision-making capacity. Mrs. Hartwell, I'd be happy to conduct a comprehensive competency evaluation, Dr. Chen had said. Based on our phone conversation, you demonstrate excellent cognitive function, clear reasoning ability, and sophisticated understanding of complex financial and travel planning issues. Any suggestion that you lack capacity to make your own decisions about travel would be medically unsupportable. My third call had been to Marcus Rodriguez, a private investigator who specialized in financial fraud cases and could help me document the full scope of Michael and Amanda's interference while also identifying assets and income sources that could be leveraged in planning my response. Mrs. Hartwell, the systematic nature of their interference suggests this has been planned for quite some time, Marcus had said after reviewing the evidence I'd gathered. I can help you document their unauthorized access to your personal information, their interference with your business relationships, and their financial planning based on controlling your assets. Working with my legal and investigative team, I'd spent the following 2 weeks developing a comprehensive response strategy that would not only protect my independence, but would also ensure that Michael and Amanda faced appropriate consequences for their systematic betrayal of my trust. The strategy had multiple components, each designed to address different aspects of their interference, while also demonstrating that underestimating a 70-year-old international business veteran had been the most expensive mistake of their lives. The first component had been a complete restructuring of my financial arrangements to ensure that Michael and Amanda could never again access information about my assets or interfere with my travel planning. I'd transferred my investment accounts to a new firm, changed all my passwords and security information, and established new banking relationships that included explicit instructions that no family members were authorized to receive information about my finances. The second component had been a legal document package that included a new will, healthcare directives, and power of attorney arrangements that explicitly excluded Michael and Amanda from any role in my financial or medical decision-making. The documents had been prepared with language that made clear these changes were based on their demonstrated willingness to interfere with my independence, rather than any diminished capacity on my part. Let it be specifically noted, the will had stated that these changes to my estate planning are made while I am of sound mind and clear judgment, in response to systematic attempts by my son, Michael Hartwell, and his wife, Amanda Hartwell, to control my financial decisions and limit my independence through deception and manipulation. The third component had been the development of what I'd privately called Operation World Tour, a carefully planned sequence of luxury travel experiences that would demonstrate my complete independence while also ensuring that Michael and Amanda faced immediate financial consequences for their attempted control. The inspiration for Operation World Tour had come during a conversation with Marcus Rodriguez about Michael and Amanda's financial situation and their apparent assumption that my travel budget represented money they were entitled to inherit. Mrs. Hartwell, Marcus had said after completing his financial investigation, your son and daughter-in-law are carrying substantial debt despite their high incomes. The mortgage on their Greenwich estate is $2.1 million. They have $180,000 in credit card debt, and Michael's medical practice has a $400,000 equipment loan. They're essentially living paycheck to paycheck despite earning over $600,000 annually. This financial vulnerability had provided the perfect opportunity for ensuring they understood the real cost of attempting to control someone who'd spent decades building and managing substantial wealth. The plan had been elegantly simple. I would embark on the most extensive and expensive travel year of my life, visiting all the destinations I'd been dreaming about, while also ensuring that Michael and Amanda received detailed documentation of every expense, every luxury accommodation, and every cultural experience they'd tried to prevent me from enjoying. But the masterstroke had been the financial mechanism I'd developed for ensuring they felt the immediate impact of their attempted interference. Rather than simply spending my own money on travel, I would establish a family travel account funded with $150,000 from my investment portfolio, with Michael and Amanda listed as co-signers responsible for any charges beyond the initial deposit. The family travel account will demonstrate your commitment to family financial transparency, I'd explained to them during a carefully orchestrated family meeting, while also ensuring that everyone understands the true costs associated with the kind of cultural travel experiences that have become my retirement priority. Michael and Amanda had agreed to the co-signer arrangement because they'd assumed it would give them oversight and control over my travel expenses. They'd had no idea that I'd structured the account to automatically charge any expenses beyond the initial $150,000 directly to their personal credit cards, with no spending limits or pre-authorization requirements. The Japan trip in November 2023 had been everything I'd dreamed it would be and more. 3 weeks of cultural immersion, historical study, culinary exploration, and artistic appreciation that had validated every dollar spent and every argument I'd made about the value of authentic travel experiences. But more importantly, the trip had been documented and charged in ways that had sent immediate financial shockwaves through Michael and Amanda's carefully managed budget. The $1,200 base cost had been just the beginning. Spa treatments, private cultural guides, upgraded accommodations, and spontaneous excursions had pushed the total trip cost to $31,400, with every additional expense automatically charged to their credit cards. Eleanor, we're receiving credit card charges for your Japan trip that are far beyond what we discussed, Amanda had called to say during my second week in Kyoto. The exclusive cultural expeditions charges are one thing, but we're seeing charges for private onsen visits, traditional textile workshops, and premium railway passes that weren't part of the original itinerary. Amanda, I'm having the most wonderful cultural experiences, I'd replied from my luxury ryokan overlooking a traditional garden. The private textile workshop with master weavers has been absolutely extraordinary, and the premium railway passes have allowed me to visit cultural sites that aren't accessible through regular tour arrangements. I'm sure you and Michael appreciate that authentic cultural education requires investment in the highest quality experiences. The Japan trip had been followed immediately by a month-long exploration of New Zealand that I'd booked while still in Tokyo, using the family travel account to reserve luxury accommodations, private tour guides, and cultural experiences that had doubled my planned travel budget for the year. Mom, you can't just keep adding expensive trips without consulting with us, Michael had said during a frantic phone call from his hospital office. The New Zealand charges are showing up on our credit cards, and we're already carrying the full cost of your Japan expenses. Michael, I thought you supported my travel aspirations, I'd replied from my suite at the Park Hyatt Auckland. You and Amanda specifically told me that I should pursue any adventures that brought me joy and fulfillment. I'm simply following your advice about living the retirement that your father and I planned together. The success of the Japan and New Zealand trips had encouraged me to accelerate Operation World Tour, booking overlapping luxury travel experiences that would ensure Michael and Amanda felt the full financial impact of their attempted control, while I enjoyed the most extraordinary year of travel in my life. February had brought a luxury river cruise through Southeast Asia, including private shore excursions, spa treatments, and cultural workshops that had cost $28,600. March had featured a private guided tour of India's cultural treasures, with palace accommodations and exclusive access to historical sites, totaling $3,400. Eleanor, our credit cards are nearly maxed out, Amanda had said during one of her increasingly desperate phone calls. The travel charges are coming faster than we can pay them off, and our monthly payments are consuming our entire discretionary income. Amanda, I'm having the most enriching cultural experiences of my life, I'd replied from my suite at the easy Taj Lake Palace in Udaipur. Your pharmaceutical background must help you appreciate the health benefits of cultural stimulation and intellectual engagement. I feel more energetic and mentally sharp than I have in years. By April, when I'd embarked on a luxury archaeological tour of Egypt with private Egyptologist guides and exclusive access to restricted historical sites, the total charges to Michael and Amanda's credit cards had exceeded $95,000, and they'd been forced to take a second mortgage on their Greenwich estate to manage the debt service. Mom, you have to stop this travel spending immediately, Michael had demanded during a conference call that had interrupted my private tour of the Karnak Temple complex. Amanda and I can't continue carrying these expenses, and you're destroying our financial stability. Michael, I find it interesting that you're suddenly concerned about travel expenses, I'd replied, watching the sunset over the Nile from my luxury cruise ship suite. For 2 years, you and Amanda told me that travel was exactly what I should be doing with my retirement funds. I'm simply pursuing the cultural education and international experiences you encouraged me to prioritize. The culmination of Operation World Tour had been a 2-month Mediterranean odyssey that had combined the most expensive and luxurious travel experiences I could imagine. Private yacht charters, exclusive villa rentals, personal concierge services, and cultural experiences that had been crafted specifically for discerning travelers with unlimited budgets. The Mediterranean tour had begun in June with a 3-week private yacht charter through the Greek islands, including a crew of 8 gourmet chefs and cultural historians who had provided private lectures about ancient Greek civilization, while I'd enjoyed champagne and caviar in settings that had exceeded my most ambitious travel fantasies. Mrs. Hartwell, the yacht captain had said as we'd anchored near Santorini, your appreciation for maritime history and ancient cultures makes this charter particularly rewarding for our crew. Most clients focus only on luxury amenities, but you're genuinely interested in learning about the historical significance of these waters. The Greek portion of the tour had cost $47,000, but it had been followed by an even more extravagant month. In the French Riviera, where I'd rented a private villa in Cannes, complete with personal staff, daily spa services, and exclusive access to cultural events during the film festival season. Eleanor, the mortgage company is threatening foreclosure, Amanda had said during a tearful phone call that had reached me while I'd been enjoying a private wine tasting at a vineyard near Saint-Tropez. The travel charges have pushed our debt beyond what we can service, and Michael's medical practice income isn't sufficient to cover both the mortgage and the credit card payments. Amanda, I'm so sorry to hear you're experiencing financial stress, I'd replied, sipping a vintage Bordeaux while overlooking the Mediterranean coastline. Perhaps this would be a good time for you and Michael to consider budgeting strategies and financial planning approaches that prioritize your actual income rather than money you expected to inherit. The completion of Operation World Tour in August 2024 had marked not just the end of my extraordinary travel year, but also the complete transformation of my relationship with Michael and Amanda, and my understanding of my own power and independence. The total cost of the 5-continent tour had been $127,400, every dollar of which had been automatically charged to Michael and Amanda's credit cards through the family travel account they'd eagerly agreed to co-sign. Their Greenwich estate had been refinanced twice to manage the debt service. They'd been forced to withdraw Sophia from her private school, and their social standing in the community had been destroyed by their obvious financial distress. Mom, you've financially ruined us, Michael had said during our final family confrontation, his voice carrying a mixture of anger, desperation, and grudging respect for the sophistication of my response to their attempted control. The travel expenses have destroyed our credit, forced us to refinance our house, and eliminated our savings. Michael, I've simply pursued the travel experiences that you and Amanda encouraged me to prioritize, I'd replied, sitting in my guest suite surrounded by artifacts, photographs, and cultural treasures from my extraordinary year of exploration. You told me that I should spend my money on whatever brought me joy and fulfillment. I followed your advice exactly. Amanda had been even more direct in acknowledging the complete reversal of power in our relationship. Eleanor, we understand now that we made a terrible mistake in trying to control your travel plans. We had no right to interfere with your independence, and we're paying the price for underestimating your intelligence and determination. 6 months after completing Operation World Tour, I'd made the decision that would complete my transformation from controlled family member to completely independent adventure traveler. I'd purchased a luxury condominium in Sarasota, Florida, and had established myself as a resident of an active adult community that valued cultural sophistication and international experience. The Sarasota condominium had been everything I'd dreamed of: 2,400 square feet of luxury accommodation with views of Sarasota Bay, access to cultural amenities and educational programs, and a community of accomplished retirees who appreciated my travel experiences and cultural knowledge, rather than viewing them as threats to their financial security. Eleanor, you've created exactly the kind of retirement lifestyle that most people only dream about, my new neighbor Catherine Sanderson had observed during one of our evening walks along the bay. Your travel experiences and cultural knowledge make you one of the most interesting residents in our community. My new will, drafted by Patricia Williams and executed with witnesses from the Sarasota legal community, had reflected my changed priorities and relationships. The bulk of my estate would go to cultural and educational organizations that supported international travel and cross-cultural understanding, while Michael and Amanda would receive minimal bequests that acknowledge their relationship without rewarding their attempted control. Let it be specifically noted, the will had stated, that these bequests to my son Michael Hartwell and his wife Amanda Hartwell are limited due to their demonstrated willingness to prioritize their own financial interests over my independence and happiness. Their attempts to control my travel plans and interfere with my retirement goals have shown that they view my resources as their entitlement rather than respecting my autonomy as an independent adult. The will had also established substantial travel scholarships for senior citizens who wanted to pursue international cultural education but lacked the financial resources to do so independently. The Charles and Eleanor Hartwell Travel Fellowship would provide annual grants of $25,000 to applicants over 65 who could demonstrate genuine interest in cultural exploration and international understanding. 3 years after the confrontation, that had revealed Michael and Amanda's true feelings about my independence, I was thriving in ways that had exceeded my most optimistic expectations about what retirement could be. My Sarasota lifestyle had provided the perfect balance of luxury, intellectual stimulation, and social connection, while my continued travel experiences had enriched my understanding of the world and my confidence in my own capabilities. The travel experiences that Michael and Amanda had tried to prevent had become the foundation for a new career as a cultural education lecturer and travel consultant for seniors who wanted to pursue international adventures. My presentations at community centers, libraries, and senior organizations throughout Florida had been consistently well attended and had generated consulting income that had supplemented my investment returns while also providing meaningful purpose and social connection. Mrs. Hartwell, your presentations about solo senior travel have inspired so many people in our community, the director of the Sarasota Senior Center had told me after one of my most popular presentations. You've shown that international travel doesn't have to end at 65. It can actually become more rewarding when you have the time and resources to pursue authentic cultural experiences. Michael and Amanda's consequences had been permanent and comprehensive. The financial stress of carrying $127,400 in travel-related debt had forced them to downsize from their Greenwich estate to a modest condominium, had required Michael to take on additional hospital shifts that had affected his practice and his health, and had eliminated their social standing in the competitive Greenwich community, where financial success was essential for acceptance. Eleanor, we understand now that we made the biggest mistake of our lives when we tried to control your travel plans, Amanda had written in a letter that had reached me 2 years after I'd moved to Florida. We lost not just your financial support, but also your respect and your presence in our lives. Sophia asks about you constantly, and we have no explanation for why her grandmother is no longer part of our family, except our own greed and stupidity. But perhaps the most satisfying consequence had been the community recognition that my response to their attempted control had demonstrated exactly what happens when people underestimate someone based on age-related assumptions about capability and independence. Eleanor Hartwell has become a legend in Greenwich, my former neighbor Mrs. Patterson had told me during a phone conversation. People talk about how she turned the tables on family members who tried to limit her freedom. You've become an inspiration for seniors who refuse to accept other people's limitations on their dreams. Standing on my balcony overlooking Sarasota Bay, watching the sunset paint the water in shades of gold and crimson while planning my upcoming cultural tour of South America, I felt a deep satisfaction that had nothing to do with revenge and everything to do with the complete validation of my right to live according to my own values and priorities. I'd fought for my independence, my travel dreams, and my right to spend my retirement years pursuing the cultural experiences that gave my life meaning and purpose, and I'd won completely. The $127,400 that Michael and Amanda had been forced to pay for my world tour had been a small price for teaching them that respect for elderly family members wasn't optional, and that attempting to control someone with substantial resources and international experience was a recipe for financial disaster. Catherine, do you think I was too harsh in my response to Michael and Amanda's attempted control? I'd asked my neighbor during one of our regular evening conversations. Eleanor, you gave them exactly the lesson they needed about the consequences of greed and manipulation, Catherine had replied. They tried to steal your freedom based on age discrimination and financial entitlement. You showed them that some people fight back with resources and determination they never anticipated. The most meaningful aspect of my victory had been the way it had transformed my understanding of my own power and capabilities. At 73, I was traveling more extensively, learning more actively, and contributing more meaningfully to my community than I had at any previous point in my retirement. The attempt to limit my independence had actually catalyzed the most adventurous and fulfilling period of my entire life. If someone in your life is trying to control your dreams based on their financial interests rather than your own well-being, remember my story. Remember that age is not a limitation when you have resources, intelligence, and the determination to fight for your right to live according to your own values. Remember that people who try to steal your independence might discover they've challenged someone with the capability to ensure they regret their greed for the rest of their lives. What's your story? Have you ever had to fight back against family members who tried to control your choices for their own benefit? Share it in the comments below. And remember to like and subscribe for more stories about turning your biggest family betrayal into your most empowering victory. Because sometimes the best response to people who try to clip your wings is showing them exactly how high you can fly when you're free to pursue your own dreams. Michael and Amanda thought they could limit my adventures to protect their inheritance. What they actually did was finance the most extraordinary year of travel in my life, while learning that some people fight back with consequences that last forever. Sometimes the people who try to control your golden years end up funding them instead. That's a lesson worth $127,400, and every dollar was worth it to prove that respect and independence aren't negotiable at any age. Justice served. Wings spread. Freedom earned. Adventure continues. The world is still full of places I haven't seen, cultures I haven't experienced, and people I haven't met. And thanks to Michael and Amanda's attempt to control me, I now have the financial means and the moral certainty to explore every single one of them. Bon voyage to anyone who thinks they can limit the dreams of someone who refuses to accept other people's assumptions about what's possible. The view from 73 is spectacular, and it's only getting better with every passport stamp I collect. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.